Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into Morons in a Mic. And before we get started, I have to apologize for episode 7. We had some technical difficulties that I'm still working with the software company with. Basically, Ted's camera or his everything cut out 5 minutes in. And when he came back, that 5 minutes was lost. So it's just me talking to myself for the first 5 minutes, and I didn't really want to upload a bad product. So we've uploaded a couple clips, but right now I'm still working on getting that 5 minutes back to see if it's recoverable. So hopefully we're using a different software today. Still working with free stuff, but hopefully today we don't have any technical difficulties, and we'll get right into it with some opening thoughts.
You know, Cody, you talking to yourself would make the people just think you're crazy, which...
Crazy? I was crazy once. Put me in a room, a rubber room with rats. I hate rats. They drive me crazy. Crazy? I was crazy.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right. Opening dynasty thoughts. What do you got for us, Ted?
All right. So opening dynasty thoughts, I know we've talked about knowing where you are in your competitive cycle, but there's also some edges to be had. People don't value future first-round picks, for example, as highly as they maybe should. And I wanted to talk about, first of all, there's a guy in this year's class that I want to talk about. So this year, there are a lot of really good running backs coming out. We got Quinshon Judkins and Travion Anderson at Ohio State. Ollie Gordon's pretty good at Oklahoma State. Oregon's got Jordan James. Like there's a lot of really good running backs, but there's one that stands above the rest. His name is Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, and he was the highest graded runner in college football last year by PFF, and has since leveled up even further and is giving us a 1988, 1989, I can't remember when it was, Barry Sanders season in today, like right now.
Yeah.
In 4 games, he has 845 rushing yards, which is underselling it a little bit because he had 127 against Portland State, but was pulled at halftime because the game wasn't competitive. So he's really only played 3.5 games of football. 845 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. He is pacing for 2,707 yards, which that's ludicrous. That shouldn't be possible. That's insane.
Yeah,
He's
really good.
Oh my God. Some of those clips, I mean, there was the one against Washington State. I think I counted like 7 broken tackles, and he had the long speed to pay it off with a touchdown. Like he's 5'9", 215 pounds, I think it is. The guy is like muscled up. Like I know he's not particularly like tall, but you know there are some other short running backs out there. But he's such a pain in the ass to bring down. Like Oregon's got a good defense, and he ran all over them. Washington State, that's a legit team. It didn't matter. He's averaging 10 yards a carry. This isn't even a product of crazy volume. He's averaging 10 yards a carry. He's making these guys look like high schoolers. Like if you have any shot to get somebody's first-round pick that you think might end up with that number 1 pick, go ahead and get it.
Yeah, I'd say he's easily the 101 in Dynasty. You know, I didn't go look, but is he catching passes too?
He is catching occasional passes, but he's not like it's not like you're going to get Rachaad White where you're catching that's his value. It's not what he is. I would say he's built differently than Derrick Henry, but I would say that he's going to be a similar NFL player to Derrick Henry, where the majority of his value comes from his running ability. Now, I'm not saying he can't ever catch passes, but a guy like he's just such a load to bring down, like especially with the rise of two highs, teams running more. This dude is probably going to be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean one of the latest mock drafts that I saw had him going to the Raiders at like 20 or something like that, and
I would hate that.
I don't think he'll last that long.
He needs to go to the Chargers. That's what he needs.
Dallas is a bunch of fools if they let another running back just pass him by. They already lost out on Braylon Allen because they're idiots.
You got a co-host? This is Luna.
Oh, Doggo. We all love doggos. Hi, Luna. All right. Stockpiling 2027 first is something that I started to try to do this weekend. Unsuccessfully so far. But I just wanted to point out before you get into the other guys that what Ryan Williams is doing at Alabama at 17 years old is insane. He's a true freshman. He's 17 years old, and he's making people look absolutely goofy.
Yeah, and it's not just him. Like Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman at Ohio State, he's also making insane catches. He had two one-handed catches that you watch him from this past weekend. You're like, how on earth did he do that?
Yeah.
And then there's Dylan Raiola, the QB from Nebraska as well. Like the 27 class is absolutely stupid loaded, and I'm sure there'll be inevitably there will be more players that pop up, but those three guys already, like if they came out now, they'd be first round picks as true freshmen. Like that's not hyperbole. There were NFL scouts that were interviewed for an athletic article or something like that. This has been reported on ESPN. Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith would both be first round picks in this year's draft if they were able to come out.
That's insane. Why do we make people wait 2 years again?
Because most people aren't Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hey, I'll be right back. I gotta a
Yep.
work email came in. I have to do this.
Gotcha. So, while he does that, I'm going to ramble about absolutely nothing. Just kidding. No, I'm going to tell you how I'm trying to stockpile some picks. So, what I did is I understood where I am in my competitive cycle and nowhere near competitive. In one of my teams, I'm 1-6. I've lost pretty much every game and only beaten the median score once.
Okay.
But this is a team I won a championship with last year, just off of luck, really. And so I realized, hey, I'm not getting that same luck this year, so why don't I, flip some pieces? So I traded Achan for a first and 2 seconds, and then I managed to get 2 seconds for Michael Pittman. So made a couple big trades, and I think I won on both of those.
And don't be afraid. I know you've said it on your Twitter account. Fantasy football is an unpredictable game. If it was perfectly predictable, everybody would be great at it, and it wouldn't be any fun.
Yeah. There would be
you believe
hundreds
in
of people trying to make podcasts or something.
Exactly. Maybe even thousands. But if you believe in somebody, go get them. Like if you have a strong conviction in a player, like, you and I have talked about Rome Odunze. I have a very strong conviction in Rome Odunze. Traded for him in 2 dynasty leagues. Wait. Well, I traded for him in 2 dynasty leagues and traded up to draft him in the other.
Yeah, drafted him in the other one.
Kind of. I traded for him in all 3 dynasty leagues, but even now, he's getting open with the Bears. I'm not concerned about Odunze. I think that he's still a friggin' star.
Yeah.
If you have a strong conviction on somebody, and, you're going to lose some trades. I traded Jaden Reed this offseason. I'm not happy about it, okay, but it happened. But you don't gain anything by dwelling
Staying
on that.
stagnant.
Yeah. You don't want to let one bad trade prevent you from making other trades.
Agreed. All right, let's get into the recap from yesterday. How are you feeling after yesterday's games, by the way?
I'm feeling pretty good because some of my takes are looking nice, and some of my other ones not so nice.
It just felt like this week was the week that the bad run defenses decided to show up.
Yeah, it did.
I don't understand it. Let's start with the Chiefs and Chargers. Obviously, the big story here is Rashee Rice is he's done. He's done for the year.
Now there is some hope, like some of the Twitter fantasy football doctors, they didn't see it wasn't a clear ACL. So maybe, unlikely, because if the Chiefs suspect it's an ACL, it's one of those things that's pretty well diagnosed on the field with like a 95%, accuracy rate.
Yeah.
So it's probably that, but there is an outside chance that it is not an ACL, in which case he's going to miss time, but it wouldn't be the full year. So that's the best case scenario. But I do, if the Chiefs think it is an ACL, it's probably an ACL. I do wonder if next year they try and game the system a little bit with that suspension, where, normally a guy with an ACL injury, they'd start him on PUP or start him slow and then bring him back. But if he's suspended, I wonder if they basically use that as their PUP. You know what I mean? Like if he's suspended for 6 games, they say he's healthy coming out of camp, and then just leave him suspended for games that he'd missed anyways. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Either way, he's going to miss extra games because of suspension.
Yeah,
at the start of next year. So
for sure. On a positive note for fantasy football, he should come back closer to 100%, after that than most people do coming off their ACLs, since he'll have a little extra time to get right. As for what it means this year for the Chiefs, essentially there are no usable Chiefs in fantasy football with the exception of Travis Kelce, which we talked about last week with Hutchinson. Is the Chiefs were having Rashee Rice do all the things that they used to have Travis Kelce do, because at this point in their careers, Rashee Rice is better at them.
Yes.
Well, Rashee Rice is not going to play for a little while, and you saw Travis Kelce, 7 catches, 89 yards, by far his best game of the season. In that one game, he had more yards than he did in the first, 3 games combined.
Yeah, and he went back to his old role.
Yep, exactly. They had to do something. You had Xavier Worthy get open for one long touchdown, but Worthy is going to be a splash play guy where it's going to be 1 or 2 touches. Like this is going to be the same kind of Chiefs offense as they had early last year. You remember with Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney just dropping everything and making that offense look really, really bad. And then Rashee Rice came up. Well, not came up, but he ascended about halfway through the year. And then the offense looked a lot better, and they won the Super Bowl. Well, I don't see anybody on that team that's going to ascend this year, because they've all been there. If they were going to ascend, you would have figured that they would do it by now.
That's true. And this definitely moves Mahomes down on my list. He's not in my top 12 for the rest of the season.
I read something interesting, and it was true. If Mahomes had been putting up their fantasy performances that he has for the better part of a year and a half, we'd be cutting him to make room for guys like Justin Fields and Sam Darnold.
It's true. I don't disagree. Yeah, he's had 0 top 12 finishes in his last 12 games.
Yep.
So he's just not a number 1 quarterback anymore for fantasy.
And then when you
unless they make a trade,
even
heard
still,
names being thrown out there like
Amari Cooper. I've heard
Amari Cooper. Mm-hmm. Someone mentioned Devontae Adams, but that's ridiculous. The Raiders would never do that in division.
Yeah.
I
don't think it's going to happen. Even if they did make a trade, the timing's not going to be there. The chemistry's not going to be there, because they won't have had that, off season to build it. Even with a healthy Rashee Rice, who has been very, very good, he still wasn't doing it because of a couple reasons. Number 1, the Chiefs run the ball more this year. Number 2, their defense has been outstanding for the better part of a year and a half. 2-3 years ago, Mahomes needed to score 30 points for the Chiefs to win. Well, he doesn't need to do that anymore. So there's not as much incentive to keep throwing the football. And then just the offense around him is just simply not as good.
Agreed. And, they keep running the ball, but it's not great. No. Carson Steele fumbled again and didn't see the field the rest of the game almost. I think he had 1 carry in the second half. 63% snap share for Kareem Hunt, who last week was unemployed.
So in the Chiefs backfield, Kareem Hunt, it's not like he looked fast. He still looks like he doesn't have any juice, but he's just a veteran runner. He's going to hit the holes. He's going to get you what's there and not anything else.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any falling forward. He's not going to do anything special. This is where, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on IR right now, but he could be coming back soon. The Chiefs have implied he's coming back soon. So that's the person, if you're looking at somebody to bid free agent availability budget on, that's the guy I'd be doing a bid
if
on.
you had to, I don't even want Edwards-Helaire.
Honestly, with Pacheco being gone for a while and how cheap it would be to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it probably only costs you $5 or $6 of free agent availability budget. Where
it's like a 4-person timeshare between Kareem Hunt, Samaje Perine, CEH, and a little bit of Carson Steele mixed in. I don't want any of that.
Obviously, Steele's in the doghouse. Kareem Hunt's just simply not. He's just not good anymore. So if Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back, and is anything, you have a valuable piece in fantasy football just because of the role he's in the Chiefs offense.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to be a top 10 running back, but as far as depth goes, that's a guy you want on your bench.
Yeah, and on the Chargers side of the ball, their offensive line looked like a mess. Obviously, they had some injuries and some guys out, but when you are letting Steve Spagnuolo move his guys around and you have a tight end trying to block the best defensive tackle in football, you've got a problem on the coaching side of the ball as well.
The coaching was a major issue all day long. They brought up Sam Mustipher, a rookie guard, and numerous times they had him trying to block Chris Jones one-on-one with no help.
It's not going to.
He's a practice squad guard. It's like, what? How? Like, Herbert isn't healthy. He's not mobile right now. You saw him wince. He had a handful of throws, though, that were absolutely fantastic, including that third down to J.K. Dobbins at the end of the game, where he actually did roll out and made a throw on the run, just absolute dot, and Dobbins dropped it. I mean, every time, the Chargers wanted to run the ball, that was the whole ethos of the offseason. They want to run the ball, get into manageable third downs, all that stuff. Well, in this game, they had pre-snap penalties, they had holding penalties, they ran for like 2 yards a carry. They couldn't do anything, which led to an average distance on third down of 10.5 yards. With an immobile quarterback and an offensive line that couldn't block the Chiefs. You're not scoring points in that scenario.
The rest of us saw this coming at the beginning when they hired Harbaugh and he brought in Greg Roman.
Yeah.
We saw the writing on the wall. The Greg Roman offense is run. And that's okay when you have guys like Lamar Jackson who can actually run the ball and a healthy J.K. Dobbins back then. The Ravens had a good running game.
Yep. Well, Herbert can run the ball a little bit, but he's not Kaepernick.
Not with a high ankle sprain.
Jackson. Yeah, definitely not with a high ankle sprain. But
I don't even know why they let him play this game.
As Herbert is a modern day like Phillip Rivers. If he can play, he's going to play. He broke the rib cartilage and didn't miss a play.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Anyone else on the Chargers that you're willing to start?
Ladd McConkey, I wouldn't be willing to start him, but he is an interesting piece that I'd definitely keep an eye on. I'd want him on my bench because he's flashing. His chemistry with Herbert's really good. That touchdown that Herbert threw to him in the back of the end zone, that was a fantastic play by both players involved. My concern with McConkey is that the volume's not great. So even if he does have a pretty decent target share, he's not ever going to be, in this version of the Chargers offense, he's not going to be a top 10, top 15 wide receiver. So you want him on your bench. He'd be good for buy-ins, but he's a high-risk player just because, again, if the Chargers had their way, they'd throw 0 times a game.
All right. I think that's enough for this game. Let's go to an even worse game. Let's go to the Broncos-Jets game. Great if you are a fan of really good D.
Yeah. Who's not a fan of some good D? This was a bad game for the offense. I am concerned about the Jets' offensive ecosystem. As I've mentioned before, Nathaniel Hackett is not good at what he does, but he's
Aaron Rodgers' guy, and that's why they brought him in.
He's Aaron Rodgers, so he's employed still, doing the same thing that he was doing. It's going predictably poorly. Breece Hall looked off. Braylon Allen still looked pretty good, but, I mean, there just wasn't much there. And then on the Broncos side, just like we said last time, I wouldn't want to play Bo Nix or any of these Broncos players because you want to see it multiple weeks in a row. The offense still looks rough. There's just a lack of talent around there. Bo Nix is still a rookie quarterback. The Jets defense is still really good. So you got to give them credit. But, yeah, I can't believe the Broncos won this game with 10 points. That was insane.
No, only one offensive touchdown. Thank you, Bo Nix, for saving everybody.
Yeah.
One thing I want to highlight here is the fact that Breece Hall is averaging the same yards per carry as Zamir White.
Yeah.
It's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. That Jets offensive line is a problem. However, looking at Braylon Allen has 4.8 yards per carry with that same line. And we're starting to see a shift where they're starting to sprinkle Braylon Allen in even more, and it's becoming an even split. So that's something to keep in mind.
Quite even. Breece was just he wasn't really on in that game. We have seen Breece be explosive. I mean, even last year, even with Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle, I'm not worried about Breece yet. He has too long of a track record. If even worse situations offensively, and he still makes it work. But Braylon Allen, as we've mentioned before, is a stud. He would start on 2/3 of the teams in the league, maybe more. Unfortunately for him, he's with Breece Hall, so he's never going to have like a lion's share, even if it is a split. He's not going to have the lion's share, I don't think.
Yeah.
But
Are
yeah,
you hitting the panic button on? You hitting the panic?
well, yeah, as we talked about last time, I'm not willing to hit the panic button after a game in which Sertan Island exists. The Broncos pass rush is really really good.
They are
They were harassing Rodgers all game long. I think they had what 5 sacks? Was it 5 sacks?
five,
Yeah,
5 sacks.
five
Hit him a
sacks.
few more times too.
Yeah, like he didn't have any like it's just not going to be a good game for any wide receiver when your guys get sacked 5 times under pressure a bunch. And again, they are using Garrett Wilson more on these deeper routes that Rodgers isn't really throwing because he wants to get rid of the ball. And that is
Yeah,
what goes back to Nathaniel Hackett being the offensive coordinator because he's never shown an ability to adjust.
right. And I think the rain played a little bit of a factor there too. You saw even on the other side, Bo Nix had a couple throws that just slipped out of his hand.
Yeah, the weather was terrible.
Cortland Sutton, you can continue to start him in a flex play. I think he's getting a lot of targets every week. Still, not all of them are catchable. They're not great targets, but they're going his way.
Oh my gosh!
And then you lost Beatty to an injury, and that's tough to see. I don't want any part of the Broncos' backfield anymore.
I don't want any part of the Broncos' offense.
Hey, I've got a team where I'm starting Bo Nix. Bo Nix is my one quarterback in a super flex league. And
Sean Payton
first. Let's move on to the Vikings and Packers. What a wild game this was. Yeah. This is probably my favorite game from the weekend.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely wild to have Jordan Love throwing 54 passes, 56 dropbacks coming off of that injury.
Yeah.
Obviously not what you want to do, but
against this defense too.
Yeah.
The Vikings defense is just really good.
Yeah, well, until the second half of this game. Yeah, they were dominating.
I mean, the Packers' offense is still good too.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about what you saw in this game.
So Aaron Jones continues to look great. He had 26 touches, 140 scrimmage yards. I mean, 26 touches. That's all anybody's ever wanted for Jones is opportunity because that's when he was with the Packers. It seemed like there was a limit, 15 to 20 touches, absolute most that he would get. Well, they freed him up in this game, and man, it was awesome. So if they keep doing that, I mean, Aaron Jones might well be a top 10 running back the rest of the season for me. That guy is in a very good offense. He's on a good passing game. He catches passes. He has a great coach as his offensive coordinator, play caller. I mean,
yeah.
And Sam Darnold, he's making legitimately impressive throws. And somebody made the comparison like Geno Smith a couple years back, where it's just really good throws. There's not a lot of like flukiness to it, where they're actually playing really good. And yeah, Sam Darnold's playing really good, and he hasn't been working. The last couple of weeks, he hasn't been working with that full offensive weaponry. He still isn't going to have Hawkinson back for 4 or 5 games, and certainly not at like full speed until further than that. But what he's doing, it doesn't feel fluky. Like it really does feel like he might be playing himself into keeping this job. And we have there is not terribly distant comps for this as far as like the lower drafted guy or cheaper guy outplaying the first rounder and then just keeping the job.
Yeah. Or he plays this into a new contract.
Exactly. So this ad's really interesting to me. Jordan Addison didn't get that many touches, but he's the perfect number 2 for this offense.
He looked good, though.
He did look good. I just can't see him keep scoring 2 touchdowns every 5 touches.
No.
I just can't. I can't see that.
Of course, it's like Jaden Reed. He's not gonna score a touch every other touch.
Well, I mean, we say that, but then last year he scored 10 touchdowns, and he didn't have that many touches either. So at some point, though, you got to figure it regresses to the mean. At some point, let's see. From the Packers side, Jaden Reed looks awesome. They're using more 11 personnel sets to get him out there. He's still not really on the field in 12 personnel, but they are designing looks for him. And there's nothing really fluky about this. I wouldn't expect 140 yards at a touchdown every game. Definitely a high-end wide receiver 2, I think. Sucks that I traded him. Christian Watson's injury is one to keep an eye on. It looked really bad, and Dontavian Wicks took advantage of that. Every time Wicks has had a 70% target share or higher, which has been 3 games now, he's had at least 18 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Like the guy just produces. So, if he's on your waiver wire, go get him because it looks likely that Christian Watson even in a best case scenario where it's a high ankle sprain, he's going to miss some time. Wicks was already eating into Watson's snap shares even before the injury. So, yeah, definitely try and get that on your team.
I want to throw a little bit of caution on Wicks a little bit. He had a good game. He had a 25% target share when Watson went down.
Mm-hmm.
But in this game, he had a 50% catchable pass catch rate.
Yeah.
And he has a 57% catch rate on catchable passes for the season.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not great, but he's still getting the looks. He's still getting the volume. But you would hope for something a little bit more.
It does, and I think that part of it comes down to playing time because he's had less playing time. So, like we hear about guys pressing all the time. You have to wonder if it's him thinking, I'm only playing 50% of the snaps. Ball's coming my way. I got to make something happen. And, like last year, he didn't have a real issue with his hands. He doesn't have the greatest hands in the world. I'm not saying his drop rate's ever going to be like, Amon-Ra St. Brown's or something like that. But his hands are fine. What really makes him special, though, is very good at separating, and he's very good after the catch. So.
All right, Josh Jacobs ceded some work to Emmanuel Wilson in this game. Are you thinking that's just because they fell behind super early, or do you think this is a sign of things to come? They want to split it up a little bit more.
It's a combination of a couple things. The Packers have traditionally relied on split backfields, but one of the reasons that they got Jacobs was his ability to handle a heavy workload. Emmanuel Wilson's earned more playing time through his play, but I do think part of it is that they got down multiple scores very early because he is the better pass catcher. Jacobs is huge. It's not much of a receiving back. It is definitely something to keep an eye on, but I'm not terribly concerned just yet.
All right, moving on to the Saints and Falcons.
Hold on, my dogs are freaking out about something.
Freaking out dogs. Yep. All right, pausing again for some dogs freaking out.
I'm freaking out, man.
While he's yelling at his dogs to come inside, I just want to point out in the Saints-Falcons game that we are at a tight end hellscape, and I said, hey, this might be a good time to go out and start Taysom Hill because Taysom Hill likes to score touchdowns against the Falcons.
Yep.
And what did he do before he went out with an injury? He scored 2 touchdowns. He lined up at quarterback, fullback, running back, in the slot, at tight end. He lined up everywhere in like a quarter and a half of football.
Yep.
And then he left, and the Falcons came back. They're like, yay, the bad man can't hurt us anymore. And, they came back. But let's talk a little bit more about the Saints and Rashid Shaheed here.
So first, I want to go back to the Taysom Hill thing because one of my hot takes was that he would be a top 12 tight end, I think it was. And the tight end position is so bad, I would actually be curious to see, based on just his 2 touchdowns, where he is. He might actually be in the top 12 or at least close to it.
All right, I will look that up while you talk about Shaheed.
All right, yeah, give us the update on that. So Rashid Shaheed, his role keeps evolving. I know he had the goose egg in week 3, but he still had 5 targets. The big issue with Shaheed is that he had been used as a downfield burner, and he's very good at it, but this past game, he was getting shallow work too. He actually had a career high 11 targets. Now, some of that was due to Chris Olave probably being banged up, but this is an offense that seems like it wants to funnel the football to its best players, which are Shaheed, Olave, and Kamara. In fact, on the season, Shaheed has only 1 less target than Olave. He has much higher air yards share than Chris Olave, and he has, I think, more fantasy points than Chris Olave. Shaheed is a screaming buy low for me just because it's been 4 games. We've seen the Saints offense and Shaheed's role in it continue to grow, and that's a player you bet on because there are definitely going to be some managers out there thinking that goose egg in week 3 is more indicative of his performance than the other 3 data points that we've got. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get 10 targets a game, but the simple fact that he did in one of these games shows you that the Saints have a lot of trust in him. And even if he does only get 7 or 8 targets, a lot of those targets are downfield targets. They're very valuable. He does not need to convert very many in order to be a fantasy football option. So if he's getting, short work in addition to that, which he did again this week, that's pretty special. That's really good. That's what you want.
All right, so according to ESPN, Taysom Hill is tight end 20 after this weekend.
Tight end 20.
So he was tight end 45 coming into the game. He is now tight end 20 on the year. But going back to Rashid Shaheed, one of the things with him is his role is evolving. He's not just being used in that deep, take a deep shot role. Especially with the Falcons, they kept everything in front of them. So they took away that deep shot from Derek Carr. Derek Carr played, I thought, pretty good.
He did.
One thing I did notice from the Saints offense, though, is that they only ran 5 play-action passes this entire game. And when you're having an issue with your offensive line and opening things up, you're probably going to want to use more play-action than that. And you saw the big difference between weeks 1 and 2, where they ran a lot of play-action, and weeks 3 and 4, where they didn't. So hopefully they look at the tape and go, hey, this was working for us. Why did we stop doing it?
It's crazy that the Falcons won this game without scoring an offensive touchdown.
Younghoe Koo is awesome, but that's okay. Stats are for losers.
Stats are for losers, yeah.
Stats are for losers. We traded in one bad head coach for another.
Hey, but at least he's targeting Drake London. So, yes, stats were for losers, but also for Drake London, apparently, because they targeted him 12 times. And then as far as Kyle Pitts goes, he had another goose egg. He's just not, this offense doesn't consider him an important piece. And it's also a little bit that they're using him in ways that don't really suit him. So I just, it's tough because people drafted him as a top 6 tight end, top 7 tight end based on ADP. And he's not going to deliver on that. There's just no way.
And I don't know what you could move on from him and put in his place. No. There's not really much out there in the way of tight ends. So
you pretty much just
you're either going to have to keep rolling with it or take the hit and see if you can trade him for whatever you can get.
Yeah, hopefully your backup tight end is somebody that's relatively useful.
If you have a backup tight end.
Yeah, if you have a backup tight end. Or you just hope that the other tight end doesn't score either, which, hey, with, again, the state of the tight end position, it's certainly possible. I am a little worried about his being Raheem Morris's decisions as far as the backfield goes. Tyler Algier had 8 carries. Bijan Robinson had 4. Again, Tyler Algier is a good player, but he's not Bijan Robinson. And I'm actually getting a little bit concerned about Bijan Robinson because he was drafted and touted as this world-breaking running back, and I do think he has the skills to do it, but for whatever reason, it has not happened. I mean, he's had 0 top 3 running back finishes and weekly scores since he got drafted. And, at some point, you got to put up or shut up.
Yeah.
And it's just
Algier is a fantastic running back, too.
Absolutely. Algier is a fantastic running back, which is why it didn't make sense to me why the Falcons took Bijan in the first round with that defense being short on pass rushers, and they spent another pick on a running back, Arthur Smith, special. I'm not terribly concerned about it. Bijan's still going to be really good, but I just think we need to reset expectations, and maybe he won't be the top 3 running back that he was drafted to be.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the backfield. Again, talking snap shares, he still had a 36-21 snap share advantage over Algier, and he had a touchdown called back.
Yes,
he had a fantastic looking touchdown called back penalty. They probably want to keep him fresh. Algier's fantastic. Also, I have Algier on a couple teams, so I'm a little bit biased there.
I see that.
London's 12 targets were good to see. Mooney is startable, I think.
Yeah,
he had 11 targets in that game, 10 targets, something like that. And keep an eye on Ray McLeod because he's got the same amount of snaps and ran 4 less routes than Drake London. So that's a name to keep an eye on.
Cousins is going to read the play right. There are certain quarterbacks that are just going to force the ball to their star. It doesn't matter the read of the play. Cousins isn't that guy. He is going to read that play out, and if Ray McLeod's the read, that's where it's going. So it's good for the purposes of making multiple people relevant, but it is, again, we need to reset expectations on Drake London. Is he going to be a top 4 receiver, 5 receiver. No, I think he'll be still a really good receiver, but I think it'll be in the 10 to 20 range rather than in the 10 range or 10 plus range.
All right, last thing I'm going to say about this game is if your answer to why you're not getting your athletic freak of a tight end more involved in your offense is stats are for losers, well, that's probably why you have a 23-39 record as a head coach.
Yep.
So
because players don't get paid based on wins, they get paid based on stats. Now, if the Falcons went to Pitts and said, "Hey, you've done a lot of winning and helping us win," and paid him commensurate with that, that'd be one thing. But you and I both know that the Falcons are going to go, "Well, see, these are your stats, so this is what we should pay you."
Yeah. All right, it's your victory lap time. Let's go Eagles Bucks.
All right, so the victory lap is, of course, Bucky Irving. We've been talking about him all offseason, that he has just been simply a better runner than Rachaad White, and we saw that change happen this past weekend. They each had 10 carries, but Irving, he even had participation in the routes. He had a 4% target share to Rachaad White's 6% target share, and before this, the most valuable carries that a running back can get are inside the 10. And Rachaad White had handled all of those carries the first 3 weeks. Well, week 4 was the Bucky Irving show inside there. He had 5 inside that range to Rachaad White's 0. Mm-hmm. And that led to Bucky Irving's first touchdown in the NFL. He was fantastic. I don't anticipate this slipping back to a Rachaad White dominated backfield. And if you have Rachaad White and if you drafted him in the second round, you're probably just going to have to sit and cope.
I'm glad the Bucs went back to him on that next play after his first touchdown was called back.
That's a good sign for a coach that understands that, hey, sometimes you got to reward a player for getting you down there. Kyle Shanahan's really good about that too, for the most part. If somebody gets tackled on the one, he's going to try and get a ball.
Yeah.
At least once.
Godwin and Evans still look great.
Yep.
Baker still got it.
If somebody panicked on Mike Evans after his quiet couple weeks against a Lions team that struggles against slots and does well against perimeter players, so it's always going to be a funnel towards a slot, and the Broncos the week before with Pat Surtain, sometimes it's just a rough matchup. It's not going to work out, and this is one of those times. Obviously, this was a much better matchup, and it worked out pretty good. Sometimes it really is that simple.
And yes, it did.
I do want to say, can you imagine? I can't even help.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Yeah, so there's a guy we know, and I'm not going to name names, but he traded Baker Mayfield for Sam Howell in the offseason. Can you imagine somebody doing that?
Yeah, in his defense, it was right after Howell was traded to the Seahawks. Geno Smith had a down year, and they wanted to just get younger at the position. Not saying I know this guy or anything, but it might be me.
Of course.
Eagles looked confused as hell. Like, they didn't know what the game plan was. They didn't have a game plan other than Hurts, please save us.
Yep. Which doesn't make sense to me, because Saquon Barkley, he averaged 8 yards a carry in this game, but he only got 10 carries in a game that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith weren't playing. Like, what are you doing? Yes, the Bucs have a very good run defense because Vita Vea played, but at the same time, it was still working. And when they asked Sirianni about it after the game, he did not have a good answer. And if you go back and watch that, it's one of those like, what are you even talking about kind of answers. And then on a more macro level, it's the scene from Office Space. I just want to go up to Nick Sirianni and be like, what would you say to do here?
What exactly would you say you do here, Bob?
Because he doesn't.
I'm a people person.
That would be his answer. He doesn't call offense. He doesn't call defense. He mismanages games on fourth downs constantly. Time clock management's not his strength. So, I mean, they hired Kellen Moore to take the offense away from Sirianni. Like, they didn't want Sirianni involved in it. They were like, Kellen Moore, and by they, I mean, like, ownership, leadership, GM level.
Yeah.
Took that away from you as a coach. So what would you say you do?
Yeah. And so who do you put the offensive struggles in this game on then? Do you put it on Sirianni or do you put it on Kellen Moore for not giving
It's a combination, honestly, but ultimately
Barkley the ball at the goal line twice.
Yeah.
Going with the tush push instead.
Answer.
All right. Who gets fired first? Doug Peterson or Nick Sirianni?
Doug Peterson. It's definitely Doug Peterson. At
That was
least
an
he's
easy one.
Sirianni. He's got a couple wins. What has Doug Peterson got? That man's 1-9 in his last 10 games.
Hey, one of those two actually won a Super Bowl with the Eagles,
That's true, which is a crazy thing
which
to
is
think
wild.
about.
Bengals Panthers. Chuba Hubbard looks great.
Chuba Hubbard does.
He really does. It's going to end up being a Braylon Allen Brees Hall situation with Brooks and Hubbard.
So I'm not ready to go there yet. I still think that Brooks is simply a better player, and Dave Canales, throughout his history as the offensive coordinator, has tended to favor one lead back. Like look at Rachaad White last year in Tampa Bay. He's tended to favor one guy. Now, before Chuba Hubbard's had a couple 100-yard games in a row, everyone, including myself, just assumed that like Jonathan Brooks would get healthy, ramped up, and take that job and have a 90% snap share, just be awesome. And that still might happen, but now we have to account for the possibility that Brooks gets ramped up and it's 60-40, 55-45, something to that effect. I still think Brooks is the lead at the end of the season, but it's not nearly as clean cut and just like, yeah, this is going to happen as it was 3 weeks ago.
No, I think it's going to end up being more Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders and Brooks at the very beginning. Yeah, and Sanders is probably still going to get that third down role. And then it'll evolve to Brooks taking pretty much all of Sanders' work.
Yeah, and some of Hubbard's, because Brooks is just too good a prospect not to. I mean, they traded up for Brooks into the second round. They've said nothing but great things about Brooks. Like the prospect himself, he was a great prospect coming out of Texas before he tore his ACL. So as soon as he gets ramped up, I still think it ends up being, mostly Brooks.
Right. Deontay Johnson, you can victory lap that one too.
Yeah, I'm going to. So again, part of the hot takes, it was top 10 wide receiver. And through the first 2 weeks, I felt terrible about that take. When Bryce Young showed up as the worst quarterback in the NFL and even worse than last year, and I knew my take was in trouble. But Andy Dalton is here to save it. So through 2 weeks, his target share is some ridiculous number with Andy Dalton, like 38%. He's working the middle of the field, which he's never gotten to do in Pittsburgh. One game you could say, maybe it's a fluke, but this is 2 games in a row now where he's getting tons of targets. He's getting some yards after catch stuff. Like this dude is a bona fide fantasy star right now. And hopefully you traded for him when he was nice and cheap, or drafted him in the offseason in the 9th round or whatever he was going in.
I picked him up off the waivers in one of my leagues.
Yeah, that man needs to be started at this point 110%. Another receiver from the game that I want to talk about is Xavier Legette. We mentioned him in the last episode that nobody saw because of the issues that we had as a probable buy low guy where, if you needed a flex, Dave Canales is a good offensive designer. He's going to use them in ways that suit Xavier Legette's strengths. And sure enough, we did see that, and he got a touchdown. He had six catches, I think it was, 60 yards, solid flex play. So yeah, that was pretty good.
He had 24% target share compared to a 31 target share for Johnson. Also, he didn't come off the field.
No,
he played almost every offensive snap, and he had 12 touches to Johnson's 13.
So will say
tried to get him running in the running game too.
I was a little bit down on Xavier Legette's prospect profile. But sometimes with these good offensive coordinators or good like offensive play callers like Canales, it really is as simple as big man run real fast. And that's what we got with Legette. So I guess that's something to learn.
He's looking good in Thielen's role. Let's talk about the Bengals and their backfield real quick.
It's looking murky. Both players they still have value, and it's not like you drafted either one in the first 3 rounds, so it's fine. But Chase Brown does look like he is starting to take more of that role away from Zach Moss. It's been trending that way for a couple weeks, and we saw a bigger uptick in that this past weekend. So it is definitely something to keep a lookout. Zach Moss is still a fine player, but Chase Brown just brings him something that Zach Moss can't. The explosiveness, he's a better pass catcher. Zach Moss isn't going to bring you that ability. It's just not going to happen.
No, and Chase Brown's looking at a 6.4 yard per carry this year to Moss's 3.9. and he's starting to take the inside the 10 carries at a 60-40.
That's the big issue. Is some of these guys they'll have higher yards per carry because they're used on design stuff and less true running back stuff. But if they're putting you inside the 10, that's an indication that they really trust you to read out a defense and pick a crease and hit it, because you can't dance around in the 10. You're not trying to hit a huge play inside the 10. Obviously, you have no more than 10 yards you can possibly get inside the 10. So, if you're getting the work in there, that's a big sign of trust.
All right. We're starting to run low on time, so let's get with it. T. Higgins and Chase are both must starts, and Eric all had 4 catches. If he's still available out there in your dynasty leagues, go ahead and stash him.
Yeah, I can't make an offer for him because he's doing this 10 months off an ACL tear. Yeah, you did, but
I tried. You said no.
10 months off an ACL tear. Honestly, if you really need help at the tight end position, which is most people, it wouldn't be out of pocket to offer a 2nd-round pick for him. Like he's from Iowa. His prospect profile was really good. Yards per route run, all that stuff was really good. His athletic profile is really good. And again, he's doing something. He's doing this 10 months off an ACL. He's had 4 catches, I think, in the last 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, in his rookie season. 10 months off an ACL. I think that it only continues to get better because the Bengals have needed a pass catching tight end for a while. Mike Gesicki, he's fine. He's not special. Eric All is bigger and he's stronger, so he can still be used as a blocker when he's not catching passes. And that gives Cincinnati's offense a little bit more versatility. So I think his role is going to continue to expand.
Fair enough. Jags, Texans. Trevor Lawrence still looks lost.
Yeah, I know we put him in timeout basically where we weren't going to talk about him anymore, but then they had a lead on the Texans, so we had to talk about him.
That was
surprising. Look right. 3rd highest percentage of uncatchable passes in the NFL right now.
Did you see that one play where Brian Thomas Jr. burned the corner and he just overthrew him? It was just an easy throw and catch touchdown.
Which brings me to my next point, because I don't really want to talk about the sadness that is Trevor Lawrence and the vibes around Jacksonville right now. Brian Thomas Jr. is real good. Real good. And hopefully you made an offer on him. In redraft, you need to stash this guy in your bench. He'd probably be cheap to get. He is the number 1 receiver in Jacksonville, as I predicted in the preseason.
You did.
Hot takes episode.
You did.
Anyways.
ETN is ceding a lot of work to Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby's got a yard per carry of 8.2 right now. ETN's not bad. He's got a 4.6. And I don't know what's going on with there. Maybe he's in the doghouse with the coaches because he played 2 snaps and then exited with a shoulder injury and then came back in later. So who the hell knows? But
that's rough.
Did you see Peterson's quote after the game? The one where they asked him about his job and he's like, "Well, that's a weird question, but okay." Like, it's not a weird question. And then he went on to say, as the coaches, we're not the ones that, go out there and make the plays.
There was also a question about him or Press Taylor calling plays, and he answered it in some asshole way. And then at the end, it was the end of his press conference, and he literally rolls his eyes and walks off. And it's like, dude, you are getting fucking fired within a month. That's why I had to say which one, because he had a couple that was like you could be referring to here.
Honestly, I would not be surprised if we ended this and he had already been fired.
Yeah.
Talking about the Texans side of the ball, obviously Nico Collins is top 5 wide receiver in football. Some idiot, had some really spicy take about him being outside the top 30 wide receivers this year. Obviously, that was a really stupid take, and we won't talk about that person.
Yeah, he has alphaed that room, and
oh yeah, he's so good.
It's beautiful to see. He's just got so much talent, and he fits so well with what Stroud wants to do. I'm so thankful that Bobby Slowick called a few less runs on early downs and started calling some more passes because, in week 1 against the Colts, it was fine. You were averaging 5-6 yards a carry with Joe Mixon. Since then, the run game has been terrible, and you're getting into 3rd and very long. And we saw, in week 2, they were able to overcome that against the Bears because it's not like the Bears offense was doing anything in that game. But in week 3 against the Vikings and Brian Flores, that's more difficult to overcome. 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. I think at one point they had like a 3rd and 31 after penalties. So, you're not going to consistently overcome that. So it was nice to see him use Nico Collins as much as he did and Steph Diggs. Diggs and Collins combined for 24 targets out of Stroud's 40 dropbacks, which is always great to see, teams really try to get the ball to their best players.
Yeah.
And
And Stroud missed Collins a couple times.
He did. Yeah, Collins was...
He could have even had a much larger day than he already had.
And that's one thing that was also mentioned. That was also mentioned in the episode. The Jags play more man coverage than anybody, and Nico is one of the top.
He made him look silly.
Oh man! So I saw that coming, and I'm so happy that I have him on almost every team.
All right. Last thing about the Texans is you can throw Akers in the trash and don't start anyone until Mixon comes back.
Yep. As far as running backs, for sure.
All right. Steelers Colts. This was the game where you got great production from Justin Fields, who was the reason they were in that big hole in the first place.
He was, but at the same time, he has still managed to cut back on the mistakes and stuff like that plagued him in Chicago. So I think that he's going to be the starter, and I think, honestly, maybe even a top 10 QB rest of the way, just because of the upside he brings with his legs. We know he's had the cannon arm, and I don't think there's any way that the Steelers can look at how their team is going and go, yeah, we're going to go back to Russell Wilson, who brings nothing.
But Russell Wilson is unlimited.
But what's weird is he's constantly listed as limited on practice report. The Steelers' run game is also really bad. I think Najee averaged like 1.5 yards per carry in this game, and it's been bad all year long. And it doesn't matter if you want to look at success rate, yards per carry. It's just all not great. Yeah. So, if they can get that run game going to support Fields, I think that'll help a lot too.
It's Fields' first time with multiple rushing touchdowns since Week 10 of 2022.
Yeah, he played good. He made some mistakes, but again, you're getting stuff with Fields that you can't have with Russell Wilson. Fields also unlocks George Pickens, who has leveled up as a player this year.
Minus that goofy fumble there.
Yeah, minus the goofy fumble. That was weird. But overall, he's getting open a lot more often than he did in the past. So that's improvement that you want to see.
It's really their only bright spot. Like, they're not even getting... They need to get Freiermuth more involved. You got to let the Muth Luth, as they say, to take some of that pressure off of Pickens. But
it's our dear friend Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator, so he ain't going to do that.
No, he doesn't like tight ends.
Yeah, nobody gets loose.
On the Colts side, I don't understand what they're doing when Richardson comes out of the game with the injury. You put him back in and immediately send him on a run. And then he goes down for the rest of the game.
And from Richardson's perspective, and you saw Minkah Fitzpatrick, like, why didn't you slide?
Yeah.
He comes in, he doesn't slide. It's like, dude, come on, man. You just left with a hip injury. Slide. Protect yourself. It doesn't sound like he's going to miss any time, but it's nice to know that the Colts receivers, because I've been pounding the table on that room as being a bunch of really good receivers, it's nice to know that they're actually still really good.
Yes. They played fantastic when he went
out. Better distributor of the football at this point in their careers. There's no way that the Colts should start him over Richardson because Richardson is too important to the future of the franchise. They have to figure out what they have in Richardson. They have to. So, not saying they should bench him, but it is proof of concept for these young guys that, hey, if Richardson can get it figured out, which, accuracy issues don't tend to get better in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everybody's going to say Josh Allen, but Josh Allen's a freak. You can't use him as an example of anything.
He's the exception to the rule.
Josh Allen exists. Yeah, but Josh Downs is awesome. Pittman's awesome. You probably should have waited to trade Pittman until after that game.
I still got 2 seconds for him, so
yeah, you might have got first.
You can go this week and try to get what you can for him, or if Flacco starts one more week, then that will help. But
I think you deal him after this week. If you're looking to deal him, this is a good time to do it. With Richardson, Pittman's not a downfield burner. That's why Pierce has been getting all those big plays. He's a downfield burner, and that's what Richardson wants to do.
And Josh Downs played fantastic. He had a 92 PFF grade in this game, leading everybody.
Yep, and Taylor also left hurt, so we won't mention that because that's a pit of sadness again, but looks like a high ankle sprain.
Into the pit of misery. Dilly.
Misery goes. All right, let's keep going because we're already almost an hour. We got like 5 games left.
All right, Rams Bears. Rams not good. Rams offense is not good. I repeat that, except for Kyron Williams, who has a touchdown in 7 straight games.
Stafford, you got to give it to him. Stafford's playing lights out. It just doesn't matter because the blocking is so bad and he doesn't have anybody that a playmaker. If you have a desperation need at receiver, you could do worse than Tutu Atwell. But yeah, that's pretty much it. None of these guys are like startable. And then I do want to talk about Caleb Williams. So he did play pretty well. He missed a couple of throws, but they didn't ask him to throw the ball a bunch this week either. And he had some really, really nice throws too, like that touchdown to DJ Moore in the end zone. Mm-hmm. That was ludicrously good. So it's too early. Like, yeah, Jaden Daniels looks like a home run pick, but there's a lot of parallels to this. You know what is going on right now after 3-4 games in this case to what happened in 2012 with Andrew Luck and RG3. Everyone thought that RG3 was the correct pick 4 games in, and I'm not saying Daniels is RG3. But I am saying that it's way too early in these guys' careers to be making big sweeping judgments like that. Yep. Because Caleb Williams, I was worried about the Washington offensive line, but they've actually been pretty good. Kingsbury had some issues in the first 2 games. Last 2 games, he's let him attack downfield, let him work the middle of the field. He still doesn't move him around a bunch, but he does at least do more of it than he used to with moving his best players around. So like he's actually got, and the run game is also really, really good. So he's got a really good infrastructure around him. Now he's playing out of his friggin' mind too, not taking anything away from him. But it's a completely different experience for Caleb Williams, who is being basically, I heard the analogy, dropped behind enemy lines and told, shoot your way out.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's been the first 4 weeks.
I do want to say Bears, who said they wanted to get an extended look at Roschon Johnson this week, and that turned into 7 touches. I heard that. That turned into 7 touches and a big day for DeAndre Swift, who was sitting on my bench.
Matt Eberflus, yikes, buddy. Odunze had the second most routes out of the whole team. So even with Keenan Allen coming back, Odunze, he didn't get a bunch of targets, but it was a day they only threw 21 passes. So it wasn't much to go around. And DJ Moore is still the number 1 receiver on that team. Although, man, if you look at the body language of DJ Moore, he was, I don't know if there's a more pissed off player in the NFL right now. Like, he is sitting at the end of the bench by himself after every single drive. He's just mad.
You got to feel bad for him. He goes from a terrible team in the Panthers to a terrible team in Chicago. He finally gets what should be a generational quarterback, and you have Matt.
You have Shane Waldron, who comes in and says, "I'm gonna fuck this up."
Yeah,
that's what I'm gonna do.
We've already started talking a little bit about the Commanders and Cardinals, so let's start with my sign over here. I don't know if you can see it.
I can't see it.
It's the Jaden Daniels watch sign where I said he was going to be a top 5 quarterback this year. He's currently QB1.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels has been out friggin' standing.
Got like an 85% completion rate.
Yeah, which is a record for. I mean, this offense through 4 games by EPA per play is the second best offense ever behind just the 07 Patriots. Like, it's ludicrous how good they are. I don't think it can continue at this pace. There's just no way. It is unprecedented. You know what I mean? Obviously, though, if you drafted Jaden Daniels in fantasy football and Dynasty in particular, like, well, you got to be feeling so good about that. Terry McLaurin, he is not washed after the first 2 weeks. There was a little bit of worry, myself included. But he's been a lot better the last 2 weeks because, again, it goes back to Kingsbury has evolved a little bit as a play caller and is working to those strengths that McLaurin has, and he's moving around a little bit more.
Yeah, and I've got Brian Robinson as a top 10 back rest of the season.
Brian Robinson looks awesome, and especially in games that Eckler's out, especially in a high-powered offense, you want the guy getting touches near the goal line, and that's definitely Brian Robinson. Sometimes it's as simple as this guy's going to score some touchdowns. You probably want him on your team.
Right.
Well, Brian Robinson's that guy.
Their offense looked great. The Cardinals did not.
Yeah, the Cardinals, Drew Petzing did not have a good game plan in this one. Not that Kyler Murray played outstanding, but they got behind so fast, so quick because the Washington offense was just going up and down the field on them.
They don't punt.
You're not really drawing any big sweeping conclusions from this game. You feel really good about what you saw from James Conner. You feel really good about what you saw from Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride will hopefully be back next week, which should help this team out a lot. But yeah, Drew Petzing, a little bit concerning. Kyler needs to do a little bit more as well.
Yep. All right, Pats Niners. Ramondre has fumbled his job away, I
Yeah, I
think.
don't know if he's going to lose it, but it's been every single game he's fumbled, and the Pats' offense is just simply not good enough to recover from that.
Mhm.
Jalen Polk is rising up the ranks. Again, this goes back to you really want to make an offer for him in Dynasty. I don't think he's going to be really that useful in redraft just because the Patriots' offense is just abysmal, and there's no way he scores touchdowns. Not that many, at least.
And he finally showed out the talent because he got the opportunity. That
Yeah.
ridiculous catch on the sideline with 2 Niners draped all over him. I mean, he was out of bounds, but it was still a great
Hey,
catch.
he's still a great. He was really good in camp. They love him, but it's just a hard cap on your ceiling with Jacoby Brissett and one of the league's worst offensive lines starting alongside you in your rookie season.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the Niners side of the ball, their offense is still really good, but pick your poison, whoever it's going to be. Obviously, you're going to start Kittle because tight ends sucked this year,
Yep.
and he's really good at football. So
Yeah, he was good in football.
they're starting to talk about ramping McCaffrey up this week, starting this week. So I don't know. Maybe go trade for him. You got a couple more weeks of Jordan Mason.
But I wouldn't overpay because the Achilles injury that he has, it does tend to linger. So I think that they're going to want to keep him fresh, and especially with what Mason showed. I just don't see how the Niners go back to being an 80%, 90%, CMC team. I think it's going to be a much closer to even split. You're still starting Jordan Mason, no hesitation, until McCaffrey comes back. But now, what about Debo and Ayuk? I'm probably not, especially Ayuk. Still doesn't look like he has that chemistry back, the timing back with Brock Purdy. I'm benching him honestly for Rashid Shaheed in one of the leagues that I have him.
I don't know if I'd go that far. He's still getting the targets.
He only had 5 this past weekend, and Shaheed has been actually interestingly, he's been a more consistent performer. Now, I'm not saying he's going to stay on my bench because, Ayuk is still one of the best receivers in football. He's still separating. Great ass. One of the best. But he's still separating at a high level. He's just the timing and consistency isn't there yet. And then with all the mouths that the Niners offense has to feed, I just want to see it a time or two before I put him back in my starting lineup. That's it.
Yep. All right. Browns Raiders, another game that I didn't like, sucked. When do the Browns just tear it all down and start over? Because Jerome Ford is really the only bright part of that offense.
They can't. I mean, I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see them trade Amari Cooper. If you remember when Cooper found out that he was almost traded for Ayuk, he said, I wouldn't mind on Instagram. So vibes aren't great there for him. And if you're the Browns, I mean, you're going nowhere fast. Deshaun Watson, that looks like one of the worst trades ever. You know what?
Ever.
I'm going to go ahead and say it's the worst trade ever because of the amount of capital they gave up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that they gave him a contract that was fully 100% guaranteed. So there is just no way they can get out of this. They
reworked it this offseason and did add a clause that
they did.
They could try to get out of it, but it'll end up in court.
They'd be fools not to, because again, it's been 4 years since he was an above average quarterback.
Yeah. And you saw him on the sideline getting in the face of his offensive lineman.
Yep.
And I don't think they like him very much because they were letting him get hit left and right.
Yep. And
if I was them, I'd be letting him hit him too.
It's like the scene in The Longest Yard where he snaps it and they all just go.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
So I'm not starting anyone there. Blake Bowers is the only startable Raider.
Yeah, Brock Bowers
even he had a...
Well, just like we talked about on the last episode, Antonio Pierce said that, they went off in week 2 against the Ravens, which, by the way, how the hell did they beat the Ravens in week 2?
We'll get to that.
Be like, what the...
I've got something about that. We'll get to that later.
Anyways, but those guys, him and Adams, went off in the second half, and that's why they won that game. And Pierce said, as we talked about on this last episode, he said, that's not what we are wanting to do. And it's like, dude, you don't want to score points. So, the fact that they won this game with neither of those guys really going off, Antonio Pierce has to feel so good about that.
Now, I did see a statistic from Ryan Heath on Twitter talking about Bowers when it comes to coverages, and he has struggled so far against single high, and the Browns run the most single high in the league. He's currently feasting over when he's facing too high, which makes sense because tight ends typically run down the middle of the field. But that could be why he didn't have as big of a game. And
I would point out that his quarterback is Gardner Minshew, which is going to put a hard cap on your point scoring abilities.
I love Minshew's vibe, but he's just not starting quarterback material. He's fine as backup. Yeah. He's that spot start, kind of come in with his mojo and give you guys a spark for a week until your starter comes back.
Exactly. Aiden O'Connell, though, the problem is that Aiden O'Connell's the same kind of guy. You got two of those guys.
I think Aiden O'Connell has a little bit more arm talent than Minshew.
Minshew.
That's just me.
Neither of them has much, but yeah, I think Aiden O'Connell has slightly more.
All right, Bills-Ravens.
All right, so we're going to talk about the Ravens first. Derrick Henry, 240 pounds, hit a speed of 21.29 miles per hour on that 87-yard touchdown. The man is 30 years old with like thousands of touches on his body. He shouldn't be able to do this. This is scientifically impossible, and yet here he is, and he's doing it.
And yet it's happening.
And yet it's happening, and I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it with my own two eyes. The Ravens' run game is so good with Jackson and Henry. They're melding it. It was a rough couple weeks where they were working out the kinks on how to do it. Mm-hmm. Jackson preferred shotgun stuff, and Henry's preferred under center stuff. So they used a lot of pistol formation these last couple weeks. And sometimes again it's as simple as two generational talents. Put them together, see what happens. And so that's what the Ravens did.
He's breaking a little Justice Hill, and he's looked pretty good too.
He has. He's got his juice back after his Achilles tear, which is always nice to see.
Yeah. Mark Andrews. He's still going to see snaps because he's a really good blocker at the tight end position, but 2 goose eggs in a row, and I'm out. I'm out on Andrews. I don't know if you can drop him because you drafted him pretty high, and there's not much out there. But
it's bad. In week one,
you can't really do anything there.
In week one, you could excuse it because the Chiefs were trying real hard to take him out of the game. He was still running routes. Then week 2 happened, and you're like, that's not great. And then 2 goose eggs in a row with limited route participation, limited snaps. He only played 48% of the snaps this week.
Yeah, and he only had 8 routes.
Yeah, last week it was 33% snap share, 6 routes. He got 1 target in this game, and he was wide ass open, and it hit him directly in both hands, and he dropped it. I think it's over. I think we can go ahead and say that Isaiah Likely, if you really have to have a tight end from the Ravens, Likely is the guy, and I think he's a back end tight end one, but mostly due to the fact that none of the tight ends are lighting the world on fire right now. Right. It's just it's bad.
Bills didn't look fantastic, but they started out behind real quick.
Yep.
And the Ravens defense had a great game plan for Josh Allen that just took away all the big plays from him and just made him try to dink and dunk. Yep. And so what we've seen now with Allen through 4 weeks is he's finished number 1, number 28, number 1, number 25. So number 1 next week.
Yeah, right. I don't think, again, just like you said, there's no real sweeping conclusions to draw from this. The Ravens got ahead so fast, they were able to take James Cook in the run game, which the Bills worked so hard to improve, completely out of the game. They had a really good game in the secondary. There wasn't really anything short. They tackled extremely well. So those little passes that against the Jags were turned into big plays for the Bills, keeping them on schedule, all that stuff. That just wasn't happening against the Ravens. And, his average time to throw in the first couple weeks was 2.7 seconds. Against the Ravens, it was 3.1, which is indicative of a quarterback who's having to wait longer for routes to develop and get open. And it's against a team like the Ravens that are just so well coached defensively. They had been a little leaky in the pass defense for the first couple weeks, but you knew it wasn't going to stay that way. The Ravens are just too good, especially Kyle Hamilton in that back end. They're too good to allow it to stay it that way, too well coached. And sure enough, we saw it last night where it was everything that could go wrong for the Bills went wrong for the Bills. And I wouldn't draw any conclusions from this game for them.
Agreed. I will say that this game proved that the Seahawks are the best team in the NFL. Let me explain. Right. The Bills were the top team in the NFL coming in by most people's standards. who got beat by the Ravens, who were beat by the Raiders, who were beat by the Panthers, who were beat by the Bengals, who were beat by the Patriots, who were beat by the Seahawks, and the Seahawks haven't lost to anybody. Therefore, the Seahawks are the best team in the NFL, and I will be taking no questions on that at this time.
The transitive property is undefeated.
Exactly. All right, Monday Night Football, real quick. The Will Levis versus Snoop Huntley show.
The Super Bowl of sadness. Both of these quarterbacks are just. One of them, Will Levis, I will say he's exciting to watch, but not necessarily in a good way, because he'll make a couple throws a game where you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, and then he'll make a few decisions a game where you're like, has he ever played football before? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then Snoop Huntley is fine as a backup quarterback. That's pretty much it.
They just signed him off the streets.
I know, and he has no time with his offense, but there's no way it's worse than with Skylar Thompson. Like, there's no way. None of these guys were playable with Skylar Thompson. That offense looked so bad last week.
But surely it could be worse than Tim Boyle.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no way it's worse than Tim Boyle either. Tim Boyle, man.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how bad this game is, and I'm curious to see Tony Pollard and see how he continues to do. The good game, though, is going to be the Seahawks and Lions with Kenneth Walker coming off the injury. Zach Charbonnet is still playing really well this year. So how are they going to split that up?
So I don't think it matters too much how they're going to split that up. I think that they're going to give Charbonnet more work, but against this Lions team, which has, like the best run defense in the NFL, I don't think it matters. I don't think they're going to be running a lot against this team. And if they do, just like the Texans, they're probably just lighting first and second down on fire. And being like, yeah, we'll go 3rd and 10. Sure, why not? So hopefully they don't do that. Hopefully they're smarter. I think Ryan Grubb is smarter. I've been impressed with him overall. From the Lions side, I'm really curious to see what happens with Jared Goff, because we have 3 data points now that say the Lions offense isn't as good as last year, despite the emergence of Jameson Williams. And, part of that is because I think they are forcing the ball to Jameson Williams. He's earned it. He's playing well.
Mm-hmm.
But Goff is a limited quarterback. Remember what we thought of him coming off the Rams. Doesn't do well with pressure. He does best in schemed opportunities where it's, you will go here with this football. And if that's not here, then here. That's it. It's like 2 reads, Well,
2 reads and panic.
2 reads and panic. That's right. Well, Jameson Williams typically runs longer developing routes because of his speed. Well, that invites pressure. Jared Goff has been always one of the worst QBs under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to see if we're going to start to see more, Laporta involvement, more Gibbs involvement, more.
My fantasy team would love some more Laporta involvement.
You what?
I said my fantasy team would love more involvement by Laporta.
Yeah, I know it would.
And I will say I do have a typo in our notes here. I called him Jared Goof, and I refuse to correct that.
No, it's accurate. But yeah, that's what I'm curious to see tonight's game is, are they going to get back to more easy layup shots, or is it going to be more of the same and you just hope that Jared Goff plays better?
Yeah. And of course you're still starting both running backs.
Oh yeah.
Starting JSN on the other side.
Yeah, at this point DK Metcalf, JSN, or starts. Lockett is not. I'm probably trying to avoid Charbonnet or Walker, to be completely honest with you. Maybe you start Geno. Maybe you start Jared Goff. But aside from that, you're still starting both Lions running backs. You're still starting Amon-Ra. You're still starting Laporta. You're still starting Jameson Williams, who I think at this point is a lineup lock because he's played well in 2 out of the 3 games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be exciting to see. And that's all we have for this episode. We've gone well over time. But that's okay. We were having some good conversations, and we will talk to you guys Friday.
Yep. Bye.